So I wanted to create a short video about how to avoid conversation loops in your Dialogflow bot. Essentially here I've got my example from previous tutorials, which is just a simple bot that will prompt the user for their name and then for the email address. And there's two main problems here that can cause loops in the conversation, which can be irritating, I would expect, to the user. So here, now it's asking for the email address, and now I'm gonna just enter something random. And then I have this catch-all name intent, which uses the system.any wildcard to match any input, essentially. And so even though I just told the agent my name, it is still jumping back to this intent because it's more most closely matching my input. And the other issue with this bot is that at any moment I can type hi, and then it's actually also jumping back to the system.any. But if this wasn't here, it would jump back to the welcome intent. And so I'm going to explain a couple of techniques on how to prevent this. So we're going to do three things here. The first thing is we want to set every context to have the lifespan 1. And I'm going to explain why. So the default lifespan for any context is 5. But this can lead to some very unexpected and non-deterministic behavior. So I prepared this small diagram here. Imagine you have an intent, and then depending on the user's input, it can go either, the conversation can go to either intent 2 or 3, and then in the next step, they will both go back to intent 5, and then there's an intent 6. But there's also another branch here, intent 4, that actually contains this loop, which is intended in this case. And now imagine that, for example, in this intent, you set a context of lifespan 3. Once you're here, down at intent number 6, it's still the same context. It's still applicable. It's still got a lifespan of 3. So here it's got lifespan 5, and lifespan 4, and then lifespan 3. So imagine that this is prompting for an input like the user's name, and then we're down here, we want to achieve something very different. I don't know, confirm an order or something like that, and then someone just enters their name, and then there's the danger that the conversation just jumps back to this intent. Another example, maybe even more non-deterministic, is if we set a context with a lifespan 5 here at intent 4, and then we have this loop back, and then we can count that it still has lifespan 4 here, lifespan 3 here, and then here we have the same context of lifespan 2. So essentially, it's not a good thing if the contexts are leaking, so to speak, into other parts of the conversation, because then unexpected things can happen. And it just becomes less predictable and less testable. So let's continue applying the lifespan of 1. It's gonna take me a moment. Yep. This is now saved. Okay. I need to go in here as well. This is already 1. Great. And then I think I started here. I did not. So let's set this to 1 as well. Oops, becoming a bit unresponsive. And then the only one I didn't check up on yet is this one. This is the confirmation intent. Once the name goes into the wildcard system.any, then we have another step of intent where I have to confirm that it's really my name. So now that we have set the lifespan to 1, there's no possibility of the conversation going anywhere where we don't want it to go. So we have the branching here, but this is what we intended. You can essentially imagine this to be the name matching, which is the system.givenName match to recognize any name. If I enter my name Peter, then it will match this one, and then we'll go to the email address intent here. But if I enter a name that's not matched by the system.givenName entity, we would go into the other branch and use the system.any to match anything, and then I have a confirmation step. If I say yes, then I go to the email again, and if I say no, I will actually go back up and ask for a user's name, ask for them to repeat. Well, technically this arrow has to go to both this and this intent, because we can still use both name intents to match, but yeah, I wanted to keep the diagram simple. Anyway, so we can already give this a try. So now I'm going to enter my name, and now it's waiting for my email. And if I just enter bloop now, there's no possibility of the name catch-all intent to match that, because this the context awaiting name is now gone. So great. This was the first step, and then we will take the next step, which is there's now another possibility of just saying hi and triggering the welcome intent again and again. And this is, in this particular case, also not what we want, because once we've the welcome intent is triggering, is prompting the user for their name input. So if we repeat this prompt again, even though the user already gave us the name, it's not really what we want. It's a useless repetition, and it can be very irritating. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a contextual welcome intents. So I'm going to create duplicate welcome intents, but then set the contexts for those. So you'll understand what I mean in just a second, because the context will be so I'm going to welcome has name. The context will now be that it's, if I set the waiting email context, then that means I already have the name. So now this intent here will exactly match my hi. Sorry, the interface is a bit slow again. Hi, hello. Hi, hello, hey. This will do for now. But this time it knows that I'm already in the middle of the conversation, and that it's awaiting my email address. So what I will do is I will say, hi, we've already met. Can you let me know your email address? And then, because now all my contacts only have a lifespan of 1, to be able to more closely direct the conversation, I need to again set the same context as an output to make sure that the conversation, that the bot is still ready to receive the email address in the next step. Okay, and now I'm going to do this once more for the email address. It's becoming very slow. Do you ever experience that? Maybe I should reload the page. So now welcome has email, and this is the case when you know what, I'm just gonna introduce a new context here. I'm gonna call it email, and that will mean that the user has given me their email. Hi, I already know about you. I'm playing with the thought of doing a little winky face, but it might come across as creepy, so I'm gonna leave that. And then I need my training phrases of the welcome style. Hi, hello, hey. That was too quick here. Okay, so is it saving or is it not? Okay, and now the only thing is I need to introduce that context email. When the user provides me their email address. And this context I will assign a very long lifespan now, because this, I'm not using the context to really set the state of the dialogue. I'm just going to use it as a way for the agent to memorize that the user has given me their email address. So I'm not using it to steer the conversation. It's just, okay, it's got an email address. So in more traditional programming, you might call it a variable as well. So once the variable is set and not undefined, we know that the email is already entered. Okay, and now if I didn't forget anything, I'm just waiting for the agent training method. It's completed. Okay, so let's do this again. Oops, I need to reset my context. What's your name? So, and if I go ahead now and say hi, it's going to say, hi, we've already met. So it's going into this one because we've got the waiting email context set here, and then it knows, okay, we're already at a different state of the conversation, and it doesn't start again, asking me again for the name, which I've already given it. And also, now what if I do this? Why? Can you say that again? Now we have another problem, which is the user is entering something that the agent doesn't understand, and the fallback intent is triggered. And now what? So now we've set our conversation to have only a lifespan of 1, and now we're lost. We're basically in a state where we can't recover the conversation. So we need to do one more thing, which is step 3 in my 3-step process that I'm going through in the video. we're going to use create another fallback intent, actually 2 fallback intents for the 2 prompts that we're asking for the name and the email. And creating a fallback intent is actually, it's a bit hidden. You can do it here. There's usually only the default fallback, but it is actually possible to create another fallback. So in this case, no, I was lying. We're only going to create 1 fallback, because in an ideal world we would also create a fallback where that is triggered whenever someone enters a name that we don't recognize. But since in my case I'm using the system.any wildcard to match any user input when we're waiting for the name, it doesn't really have any effect, because system.any is really matching anything. So I can only really apply this technique for the email address. And now this is the part which is interesting. So if I just save it right now, it's going to be the same as the fallback intent, and there's going to be an error message telling me, hey, we already have a fallback intent. So I have to enter an import context here. And then the Dialogflow agent knows that it is the fallback is going to be triggered at a different stage of the conversation. So again, I need to set the same as an output context, because otherwise the context would be lost and the conversation would be in a state where we can't recover from. We don't need any training phrases really, because it is a fallback intent, so it will match anything that is not an email. And then we're going to say, sorry, I didn't get that. Please enter a valid email format. Well, no, that's not entirely correct. Please enter an email address in a valid format. Okay. Saving, saved. So I probably need to reset my contexts again. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay. So hello, what's your name? So let's go with something more exotic here. And now it's going into the name catch-all. I'm going to confirm. And what's your email address? And now I'm going to type something unexpected. Of course, in a more advanced bot, we would also try to match questions that might potentially come up, but we can't really cater for every possible thing that the user can enter. So in this case, now the fallback intent is triggered. And yeah, we have another chance here to enter an email address, which is a valid email address format. So I'm going to do that here. Oh, here I got a little thing that's not working correctly now, because it's trying to use this intent, but it's actually gone. Anyway, I'll fix that in the next video. Haha. I think I can demo one more thing. So now this is basically the end of the conversation, but if I now enter hi again, it's not going to match the default welcome intent and ask me again for my name, because that would just be an endless loop. But instead it should be matching the welcome.has email intent. Let's see. And now we're in a state of non-recovery because Dialogflow is hanging. No, actually it's back. Okay. Okay, and now it says, hi, I already know everything about you. So yeah, great. So we could set this at as the end of the conversation, or you can continue it from there. So again, in summary, what did we do? 3 points. We set all lifespans to 1. We created contextual welcome intents. I put small talk in brackets because it's almost like small talk when I say hi in the middle of the conversation. And then we reprompt for the next step. One more thing about this. Of course, use with caution, because it is it's also a bit dangerous, because you're essentially trapping the user in the conversation. It's not, once you do this, the conversation becomes like a funnel, and the user might not feel free anymore, and they can't just enter anything. We're just reprompting them, and then if they don't give us what we're asking for, then they're trapped in that as well. But since natural language processing is still at the beginning, sometimes we just have to do that, otherwise we can't cater for every possible input. Anyway, and then we have the contextual fallback intents in case the user enters something that we can't recognize, and we can reprompt them again to give us that input, and we don't drop the ball on the conversation, because we also reset the context to 1 in this case. Cool, so I hope this was useful, and also I hope it was understandable. Arguably, this was one of my more videos with a little bit more complex topics, so let me know if this makes sense, if you understand it, and also if it's useful. If you have any other ideas, I'd be keen to know.